first let me introduce this session. This session is titled Lessons Learned Going from Zero to One with the Help of Open Source. Presented by Rich Everts. Rich is a co-founder and CEO of BestieBot, a home AI company specializing in aging-in-place solutions. His previous award-winning work spans artificial intelligence, film and video, UX design, and more. He still believes Sierra represented the pinnacle of the golden age of PC gaming, though Microprose is a close second. So with that, I'm going to step aside and let Rich take over.
Thank you, Jay. All right, so excited to be with you here today. We have a little bit more time than usual in a lot of the CPOS talks, so I'm hoping that I can speak a little bit slower and still get through some really awesome content for everyone. So let's just kick off real quick. The day is about lessons learned going from 0 to 1 with the help of open source tools. And I want to, let's make sure that our clicker is working. Today, I am discussing about $750,000 plus worth of my experience today. And that includes about 4+ years of research and development of in-kind work, full-time work that I take on outside of my normal gigs, as well as over $125,000 worth of cash. And so there's a lot of experience here that I want to go through. Now, this is not necessarily what everybody's journey is going to be like if they want to build their own startup that uses a lot of these open source tools. I'm building a hardware system, which is notoriously expensive, and also combining it with artificial intelligence. And so today, I'm not going to talk too much about that, only in enough to contextualize some of the information that you may get. So this is a lot about those lessons. And I also want to let you know that this is just me speaking. This is not BestieBot. This is not any of my clients or any of my customers. This is just my experience and my thoughts. And I really want to give it back to the community. And I love everything that people are doing at CPOSC and all the teams and everybody that's working in the local community. We have a great community here. So this is my opportunity for the year to be able to give back. So let's take a look at the first issue, which is I really believe you have to live your problem. And so a lot of people here know that in my particular situation, I have a son who is an adult now, and he has severe autism, and he cannot speak. He requires daily care. And so for me, my problem that I am facing is the same as all of my customers, which is we say to ourselves every day, I can never die. I can never die. Because what's going to happen to them? And this particular problem that people face out there has a lot of solutions. So there's financial packages to make sure that things are okay there, or there's social services. But what are the technology solutions to this problem of how can I die and still feel like things are going to be okay? And so this is a problem that grew up out of my own challenges that I'm having at in middle age, and what am I going to do for the next few years? And so a lot of people go out, they look for problems to solve, but when I go through and tell you some of the challenges you're going to have here in building startups and going from 0 to 1, you're going to understand that if you're not living your problem, it's going to be difficult. So it's really important. So, for instance, this whole solution that we're building long-term is being able to take care of someone in a home, to converting their home to being able to act as a caretaker. And this is a big solution, and your solution out there might be big as well. Well, cut it down, break it down, right? And that's what you need to do. So you start off with what's known as a minimum viable product, an MVP, which is this where the 1 is. You'll see it's a bare minimum solution you can sell, okay? Because you're building a business, remember? And so you need to have cash flow. So with that cash flow, you will be able to fund the next milestone. So think of it as going from mountain peak to mountain peak to mountain peak. And between each one, you got to go through these valleys and all these things to get to the peaks. It's peak to peak, okay? And you can have your solution laid out over, in this particular one, I just used 5 years as an example. You'll see that in 5 years, you have a solved problem. But when you're thinking about your business and your device and what you're building, you have to think of it in these kind of milestones. And so for me and what I was doing and building this this solution to be able to take care of things in my home, I had to start with something that was a lot more simple. And I'm not going to sell this. The whole point of this is just to show you how I made that decisions on the milestone 1, right? So this is a minimum viable product. This just collects data around the home and to be able to do a number of things with it. So number 1, it has an open source hardware solution. So I used a Raspberry Pi for the processor board. Now for software, I used an open source solution as well, which I used a Django API for the database I/O. Now, I did use proprietary ML and an iOS application to be able to add some value to the product. But in essence, over 2/3 of the product is using open source solutions. And even the ML and the iOS is using a lot of open source capabilities in order to get an initial product to market. So you don't have to necessarily come out with this super customized boards and all these things right out of the gate. Take some open source stuff and put it together, and that the solution that you come up with that ties everything together does have value. Okay. So what did we use? So let's take a look at some of the open source software that you have that's when you're especially making AI enabled devices. Number 1, it's going to be in Python mostly right now. Okay. If you know C++, great, but Python gives you speed. And you're able to iterate very quickly. We could take customer feedback and we can iterate on that and come out with a new thing and test it fairly quickly with Python. If you're doing data science stuff, of course, you probably know this, but you're going to be using a lot of scikit, a lot of NumPy, which are all open source tools. Pip install, boom, great, we're done, let's go. Now, these here, the next 3 I want to talk about are OpenCV, TensorFlow, and PyTorch. Now, OpenCV is great, built in C++, I believe, and C. So it's fast. It does have Python bindings. You can compile it with CUDA or not CUDA, and it's a great tool because part of the system, we're doing a lot of camera work as well, which I'm not going to talk about today, but we do a lot of computer vision. And a lot of I run Lancaster AI as well, so I do a lot, and I really focus on object detection, vision, neural networks, and those kind of things. So TensorFlow and PyTorch are awesome tools as well. Now, TensorFlow is really great because it has something called TensorRT in it, and that allows you to convert your types of your integers, which are the basic building blocks of neural networks, from uint like 32s and 64s to uint 8s, which means that the memory that you use to figure out what's happening at a certain spot goes from being this big down to this big. And so when you're multiplying things, when you're multiplying a lot of small things, it goes faster, 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 faster. And so TensorFlow has that, which is great for deployment on the edge. And of course, you have PyTorch, which is a great way to quickly build neural networks. And it is a fabulous tool, and you can export your things to TensorRT using the Onyx framework. But it does help you move things pretty quickly. And of course, Python, which allows you to build things and then be able to convert it to like a C compiled setup. So it's a library, .so library. And what that means is you can hide your proprietary Python work and distribute it to the public if you need to. Okay, so you can work on your open source. You can give back to the open source community while protecting your proprietary work using something like Python. And you can also get some speed ups from there as well. Now, in terms of licensing and things that you want to work on, MIT is preferred. And I'm sure there was a great talk earlier today about a lot about licensing, and I missed it, but I'm looking forward to watching the recording. And so MIT is preferred because you can just attach it to the repos really easily. And if there is no license, like you come across, and this happens often when you're dealing with neural network stuff, like people are just doing cutting edge stuff and they forget the license when they just dump a repo on there that maybe has 10 stars or 15 stars. You can't use it because by default it is proprietary. So they have to specifically have that license. You can open up a GitHub request to see if they'll add that license for you, but it's something to remember as you're going through these. So let's talk a little bit about the hardware. So, for us, it was too much to build our own hardware for Milestone 1, which is why we went with the Raspberry Pis. And we preferred not to have to deal with the FCC. So the FCC, if you're going to do anything that requires radio interference, well, guess what? You're going to have to go through a bunch of hoops and everything like that. But from my understanding, if it's already pre-approved by the FCC, you can package and resell that and not have to deal with it. So again, speed to market. And of course, Raspberry Pis and Arduinos are fantastic tools. Everybody here, I'm sure, is very familiar with them. And if you are not familiar with them, they do allow you to build hardware prototypes very quickly. And there's a lot of information out there. So definitely look at those. And I'm going to use the Mycroft Mark 1 as an example, which is an open source software and hardware solution. It's like think of it as like an Amazon Echo in the NLP, and it's built on these open platforms. And they came out a number of years ago and have built an entire business model around that. And it's an interesting way to handle the hardware and software. And if you're interested, you should check out the Mycroft team. They do have a Mark II, which was just released. Now, the interesting thing about theirs is the casing. So this is something where a lot of people don't understand what goes into casing. So injection molding requires cast. Like you have to build a cast, like a metal cast, and then shoot the plastic into it. But you're looking at $25,000 plus per run in a lot of areas. So, if you don't have that kind of capital, what are you going to build? Okay, what are you going to use? Well, 3D printing. A lot of people say, oh, 3D printing can work. And that's true. Generally, though, it's slow in quantity. And it's high in cost. So if you have a 6-inch by 8-inch by 7-inch thing that you're building, you're going to have to build a structure for it on the inside, and the system's going to have to build that for you. And then if you have a high resolution, it's going to be very slow. And honestly, in my experience, I'm not dissing 3D printing. The results are okay, but they require a lot of post work. Like you got to do a lot of sanding, a lot of cleanup, filler, polishing, and stuff like that. So that wasn't the solution necessarily that I was going to look at. But so I preferred going with wood that we used for cost, because it was low cost and it has a nice organic aesthetic. Now, I am cognizant, and you should be cognizant of this as well, that it is difficult to scale if you're building things with wood. So there's a lot that goes into putting everything together. If you're going to put on any kind of extras on it, it's going to be difficult. I would recommend highly contacting and using the 717 Makerspace here in Central PA. It's in Lancaster. It's run out of an old Thaddeus Stevens building. They have awesome things. They have all the 3D printers. They have all the laser etching. They have a Carvey down there, which you can use to create custom setups in your wood and everything. It's an amazing place. And if you're thinking about it, you kind of have to have some kind of connection to the makerspace. I'm not sure where they are with all the COVID stuff right now, but they are a wonderful solution. You should check them out. Okay. Packaging. So how is this going to work? Because the first part of your brand that a customer touches is going to be your packaging. Steve Jobs was notorious for getting into these details that people didn't understand at the time. Now everybody understands UX and everything. But for me, and my choice, something you should think about for your devices as you're building them is you should look at custom boxes. Now, I chose Fantastipack. I don't make any money from them. I have nothing to do with them. It's just a solution I found. But you got to remember that they're expensive in low quantities. They're $10 to $30 per box, which is going to add to your cost of goods sold. Okay. And you need to measure a lot. So not only you measure, have somebody else measure, because it takes 4 to 5 weeks to get a delivery. So if you order 50 boxes and you're waiting 5 weeks to get them, and then all of a sudden, crap, we used the wrong size, guess what? You got to start over. So you measure not just twice, not just 3 times, measure a bunch, have somebody else check your measurements and build these boxes. There are tons of them, 30 different boxes that you can get. Now, packaging materials, I would go through a company like Uline. You can get these massive things. They're like $100, but they'll last you years for your packaging. I mean, hopefully they won't. Hopefully they only last a couple of weeks. Hopefully you're shipping enough stuff, but they are massive, and it's a good wholesale way to get packaging materials for your devices. So this is a way that you can add some panache, some style, some aesthetics to your box for your customers when they first touch your thing, and like, they can feel that brand really in their hands. So you got to understand your costs, right? That's why I recommend Uline. So you got to offer probably in many cases free shipping. So when you're offering free shipping, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to need to make it light, and you're going to need to still be able to protect your device. The USPS is great for this because it's free. Like the boxes are free. You can go to any post office, and you have a specific stated flat rate of money, so you know exactly how to calculate your cost of goods. So if it's $5.95 and you get 20 of them, you know exactly how much it's going to cost to send all of your stuff. So if you're at that initial level, that first starting level, I would definitely look at those. Okay. Some of the lessons learned. Well, I'm going to leave this up here, so I'm going to read it to you, actually. I added all the product features that each of you demanded. Now our product is a worthless hodgepodge of complexity. I appreciate your input. I couldn't have failed without you. And the guy's like, teamwork. All right. So this is a little bit about how it is sometimes the teams end up coming together. So let's talk about this. 5 lessons about teams real quick as we went from 0 to 1. So deploy where you're time inefficient. Okay. So what this means is, everyone here is pretty smart. If you're dealing with open source, you kind of have to be, and you have a way of thinking about the world and the way of processing things. And so my guess is that almost everybody here could probably figure anything out technically, given enough time. There's nothing that you couldn't do. I really believe that. The challenge is how long would it take you to learn it? So if it's taking you 6 to 9 months to learn something, you probably need to bring on a team member to figure that out. That doesn't necessarily mean you bring them on full time. You could look at contracts. You could do other things. Something to remember, everyone has to sign an NDA, an IP assignment before touching or saying anything. Now, investors are going to require it when they do their due diligence, and handshakes are not enough. So an NDA is a non-disclosure agreement, and an IP assignment basically says that anything they work on gets assigned to the company that you're working on and building. And so I've had some serious disagreements with software engineers who are like, I'm not signing that. Well, guess what? You're not on the team. Because if you don't respect the company enough to sign that, then you don't understand what we're trying to do and what we're trying to build. Okay? Ongoing funding, if you're seriously going to consider it for your device and your product that you built with open source tools to start with, and you're probably going to keep building with a lot of them, you got to get that. You got to get it. Here's a story. Vest your co-founders and employees, period. So vesting is this idea that when people get shares at the beginning, you have to work for a certain number of years to get a certain percentage. So usually it's 4 years, and you'll get 25%, 25%, 25%, 25%. That way you don't get them all at the beginning. There is a company here in Lancaster, who I won't name, who started as in a college with 3 roommates, and they split the equity 3 ways, 1, 2, 3. Well, guess what? One of those guys quit after 2 weeks. And so 6 and 7 years later, they're still raising money. And that guy, he gave him some back, but he's still holding on to a lot of those shares. And so it really hampered the company from raising money because he just sits on that. Now, is that fair? Is that right? Absolutely not. And so that's what it can cause problems. So vest your co-founders and your employees. Okay. Here's one. People make mistakes all the time when trying new things. People are learning. People are doing things. Look, just correct. Let the best idea win and move forward. And that's how you build trust and good products. Okay. So if you have an outside standard of just building a good product, and there's not political things going on in your team, and there's not these ideas, your teams are going to be a lot stronger because they have this outside idea that they can move towards, and it really protects your people and it builds instability in the system. Okay. And so that comes to, someone who brings you a problem with a solution is worth 100 times the person who only brings you problems to solve. Encourage your people to think and be outcome oriented. And so I'll give you a great example of what this means. So when I'm dealing with team, and many of you are probably dealing with your teams on different things all the time. We get lost in a lot of complex ideas and things. We're talking about bits or this abstract idea or that abstract idea, and we get lost in terminology and all these things. The way to move forward is always to bring it back to saying, what is the outcome that we're trying to get to? What is the goal here? What is the outcome? Go back to that and work backwards, back into all the tech that you're working on. Focus on that, work backwards, and the solution will present itself. And the team members can all see that. They can see it unfold, and they'll have faith in the solution as you're moving forward. And there's no bias. There's no stuff that's going on with the team. It's just being outcome oriented. And when people think like that, when people start thinking about being outcome oriented, they can think of solutions on their own, bring them to you after the problems are, and that there will give you much better team members. Your team would actually be taking care of things before they become problems for you. So, okay, legal and accounting. I'm not an attorney. I'm not an accountant. I'm not advising you here on anything specific that you should 100% put in your business. Go talk to a lawyer or an accountant, okay? So with that proviso in place, I'm just going to give you my experience. So in my experience, LLCs are generally good to start for tax purposes. They give you liability protection and they're easy for taxes. They're pass-through entities. So what that means for you, if you're building a business, is it goes straight through to your taxes. Which is why when people talk about, it's no big deal to tax people who make more than $400,000 a year, what they're not telling you is that because they're pass-through entities, many businesses that are small businesses easily hit that $400,000 and $500,000 threshold because all their revenue from their business, like a mom and pop stores, on Main Street, all those businesses, all that income and revenue passes through to them personally, right? And then they have to pay taxes on it. And there's a lot that goes on there. So it's just, but LLCs are great for keeping your taxes simple and getting some liability protection. Now, then you convert to a Delaware C Corp when you're ready to begin fundraising seriously. All the big dogs expect it. You're going to raise funding from anyone? They're going to be like, are you a Delaware C Corp? That's what they're going to ask you. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but the costs are around $5,000 for that conversion. Okay. Now, for accounting, you should know about how much money is in your account every month at least. Now, there's people who are like, oh, every day you should know exactly how much. And maybe that's you, and that's okay. I know Y Combinator and others recommend going through it at least once a month, like going through all the numbers with your bookkeeper and everything. And you run all of your metrics like month-over-month revenue, compounded monthly growth revenue, paid customer acquisition costs, and anything else. Go check out the Y Combinator videos on accounting. They will go through and give you a ton of information about how to do this, and they're fantastic. And you can understand what all these terms are. And you can expect to spend about $3,000 to $5,000 per year on taxes. More if you're using an accounting firm to do your books on a monthly basis. Maybe they give you some discounts and stuff. But that's a little bit about the legal and accounting. Okay. So you have a device. You've cobbled a couple of things together with your Arduinos, your Raspberry Pis. You assemble this. What are the financing? How do you manage that? Well, there's generally 5 stages that you have. You have your friends and family and pre-seed rounds. Often they'll go together. Then you have your seed round, which is generally where your accelerators come in. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then you have your series A, B, and C, which are usually when your VCs start to come in. And then private equity, is when you're really scaling and just taking your idea and going forward for it. Okay, so that's kind of how fundraising is broken down. So let's talk a little bit about this. Number one, accelerators really don't like hardware. I'm going to tell you out of the gate. They really don't, because hardware has high capitalization. And so if you're building a device, it's going to be challenging to get some fundraising, okay? But if you're starting here in Central PA, the Ben Franklin Techcelerator program should probably be your number one option if you're just starting. Contact Andy Long. He's over at the Candy Factory. You don't get any money, but you do get to compete for a $10,000 award for your device or your solution. Okay, which is pretty cool. And they help you hone your message, do your customer discovery, and all those things. So it's a great way to look at things and get started. Now, if you're looking for very hardware specific kind of stuff, you can look at Alpha Lab Gear. There's a gentleman, Cole, who runs a lot of that out of there. They're out of Pittsburgh. You get $50,000 out of the gate, and they help you look at a number of manufacturing challenges and other things like that. They're a great team. Next Fab is down in Philly. That's Todor and those guys. They give you $25K. Now, I do want to mention that each of these, Alpha Lab Gear and the Next Fab, they are going to want you to have a solution that's probably already done. Now, they'll tell you that, they'll look at great ideas on the websites, but when you get into the interviews and stuff, you got to have it done, right? You got to have at least a prototype that's functional and working, okay? And a great website to look at is F6S. I would check those out. F6S, I've been able to speak to people all around the world in Europe, London, Tokyo about their programs and what we're doing and what they're doing, and it's a great way to look at information about fundraising. Now, once you get to the point where you have a prototype, you have an MVP, and you're ready to move forward, you can look at the big dogs in the seed round and the Series A of the accelerators. These are top 15. You can take a look at these, go check them out. I'm sure the slides will be available. You can go back and check out this video. And most of these will give you upfront investments. They'll usually give you something like $20,000 for a certain percentage, and they'll give you something called a safe note, which is it's a kind of investing framework to be able to use. And so basically you get $125,000, you give up 6 to 7%, maybe 10% of your company. You go attend to the programs for 12 weeks, sometimes more. And then at the end, you'll have a demo day, which you will present your new product, and people will invest at that point anywhere from $1 to $10 million in your product. Another option is crowdsourcing, and I would seriously consider it for a lot of people, but you should have a working prototype. And don't be one of those jerks who goes and raises a bunch of money and never delivers, okay? Have a working prototype. And if you don't have a working prototype and you are fundraising, here's a way. You should use the Scotty principle, Scotty from Star Trek principle, which is if you're thinking about how much it would cost or how much time it would take you, double it. And that's what you tell everybody, because chances are that's how long it's going to take. Okay. Go to Kickstarter. Kickstarter is a great place you can go. You can also go to Start Engine, which is a new SEC approved tool. Pretty cool. You can raise up to 1.5 million without having to do fancy audits and things like that. It's a great way to raise money from a community. People have raised millions and millions of dollars. So Start Engine is a place that you can take a look at. I think Mr. Wonderful from a lot of the what were those things called? Shark Tank is now working with Start Engine. Okay, so I'm going to close here. I'm going to bring up a couple of very hard lessons that I learned, and these were very difficult to learn, but I want to pass them on to you. Number one, rarely listen to anything anyone ever says. Watch what they do. Okay, so investors will say that they give money to ideas. They don't. They give money to people who are already winning with some kind of traction. So you already have something that you're selling, okay? Or you have a huge list of people who want to use your product, or they have a high-profile team member. So if you have somebody on your team who's already done an exit, or is works at Google, or worked at Google or Facebook, right, or anything like that, they're much more likely to give you money. And the money advisors always win. I've gone into meetings where a sequence of meetings, and the product people say, I love it, I love it, I love it. And then the money people say, this might happen, a year or 2 years later. So we're not going to put we're not going to take a risk on that. And guess what? You're done. So that happens. So don't listen to anything anyone ever says. Always look for, are they writing you a check? Are they putting you in a program? Are they actually returning the work? Things like that. This is one of the lessons of startup life if you're going to start building this 0 to 1 kind of situation. Let's look at another one. Building on that, it is a pure numbers game. You're going to get rejected constantly for the stupidest reasons, okay? I can tell you all kinds of stories. So you can expect to get around 1 to 2 yeses for about every 75 no's. So get used to rejection, right? Princess Bride, right? Get used to rejection. Okay. Take feedback and only if it's the same feedback from many investors and or users do you take it seriously. So right, when we're doing lean UX, many of you know that, maybe you'll do a customer discovery, you'll interview 5 to 7 customers, and you'll look at the feedback. And you'll find that if all 5 or 7 of them give you the same feedback, it's a very good indicator that, this is a feature we should probably look at. Okay, it's the same thing with the investors. Investors are going to tell you all kinds of things, right? And sometimes it's just going to be silly stuff. But, it doesn't mean that you do anything until you hear it from multiple investors. Okay? And I want to close with this, which is, most importantly, it is going to cost way more than you possibly think to build any kind of game-changing or AI-enabled, a hardware device, or any kind of solution. And it's not just in money. Okay? So this is about startup life, if you're looking to hop into that. So, the pressure, the financial pressure. And so you can expect to have to put a lot of what you are, everything that you have in many ways, into these kind of devices and products and things that you want to build if you're serious about that. Now, I'm not saying you haphazardly just go in and just spend money, but you should understand that there's a good chance you're going to be putting in your retirement. You're going to be putting in 401ks. You're going to be borrowing money. You're going to be doing a lot of things, and you have to be prepared for these high risk, high reward situations. If you cannot handle high risk and high reward situations, you may want to reconsider. Okay. Another thing is time. For me personally, it's been about 637 days since I've had a day off. Now, that includes a ton of 100-hour work weeks, tons of 20-hour work days, and it's a lot to stay focused. You have to stay focused for an extended period of time. It's not one of those New Year's resolutions that you do for 3-4 weeks, right? You got to stay focused for months and months on end, which turn into years on end, right? Now, you do have to take a break. You do have to relax. You have to understand what your limits are, but you have to be prepared to stretch those limits. You got to be prepared for rejections. So, what I mean by that is I've gone into a meeting to have fundraising. I literally had the investor sit me down and say, "You are too stupid to pull this off." Okay. I've gone into investor meetings where they tell you something. They're like, "Okay, you do this." And you're like, "Okay, I'll do this." And you come back to them, 6 months or 9 months later, and they say, maybe you should do this, instead. And they move the goalposts on you. Okay. Or you have things like team members, and when you're a pre-revenue startup, and many of you who are going from 0 to 1 are going to be pre-revenue. And so, your team members are working for very little or almost nothing. And you put a lot of energy and effort in. And if they leave for something else and they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. You got to be able to handle that rejection on a business and personal level. So, but if you can endure all those things, okay, the financial pressure, the time, and stay focused for the time, if you can handle all those kind of rejections, and you can pass through that crucible, so to speak, that'll take you to the starting line. And that where something that you have is a 1. Okay. And you can look down that starting line, and you can look down at all of your competitors who have 1 of something. And from there, well, the future is unpredictable. Anything is possible. And that's how I went from 0 to 1 with the help of the open source tools. So thank you. And I'm going to open it up for questions. Okay.
I haven't seen any questions come up, Rich, but if folks would like to make a comment or a question, there is a question from Grant there, I guess we could go for.
Yeah, okay. I want to actually, let me address, I'm not sure if it's Louis? Beware of overly educating investors and their yes, absolutely. I've actually, I've run into that where I have actually I used to go down to Philly like the last 2 years to work with some specific people because it's just my personality want to give, because, and a lot of people here in open source are like that too. We're creative people. We're creative, we're open people, and we love to do things, and we get so excited, right? That's who we are as people in many ways. And I've had where I've educated these people, and I've seen my ideas come out in some products, and that actually concerned me. And so I've gone into more of a stealth mode in a lot of ways. Like, I haven't actually talked a lot about the tech today. You understand? And that's because I'm not supposed to be selling stuff, which I is important. But at the same time, I'm actually moving a lot of stuff into stealth that we're working on. So thank you, Louis. Louis, that is an excellent point. Okay, Grant. I know that you've been working on this for several years and has had a name change. The vision is the same, but it sounds different 6 months ago. How did your mission change, and how do you keep that mission? Okay, right. Excellent question, Grant. So that I'm going to give you a thought about strategy and how that works when you're going from 0 to 1. So you got to get something out into the market. So 6 months ago, I had to figure out where I was going to go with what we were doing. We didn't have a product, and the team was kind of, we're working on this long-term solution, but it's just taking too long. So we decided to choose the path of the Apple I versus the Apple II. So many of you are familiar with the story of Apple and how they got started. In '76, they were working at the Homebrew Computer Club. Steve and Steve were members at that Homebrew Computer Club, and they wanted to start building a home computer, and they started giving it away for free, the designs and everything. Then they started helping people, and then they were like, oh, okay, well, let's sell some. So they sold some to a local computer company, and then when they built the Apple II, then the Apple II was a direct consumer product, right? And so that was for everybody. And then you started having your floppy disk drives and all these other things that were integrated in it. And the Apple I was originally like very specific kind of tapes and components and stuff. And so the Apple I was essentially made for developers. It was a niche setup for computer geeks like us, right? I mean, that's who it was for. And so there is a track record, and there's a number of products out there like that start off like I talked to the owner of the Pebble Watch, who now works at YC, during an interview a long time ago, and that's one of the questions we talked about was, starting off with something that maybe is not quite for the full consumer, but something that is, more for technically oriented people, might be a good solution. Mycroft was, very similar to that, right? That's what they based their whole business model on. And so, starting off with building something for other developers is not a bad idea, as long as you continue moving towards that direct-to-consumer product. It shows that you have an idea, you can gain some traction with that initial idea, right? And then you can take that and go towards investors and say, hey, we have this vision that we're going to take in these separate milestones, and we can go there. And so that's what we did at BestieBot. And I think that if you're looking at what you want to do for your strategy, I would seriously consider that as well. We're still keeping the same mission, just a milestone-based approach to that mission. Awesome. All right. Thank you, Nathan. And I think that is it.
I think that is. Thanks, right. Rich, for sharing. Thanks for sharing your story. This is good for anybody who's looking to get into this on their own. That's good set of steps and good advice. Thanks very much, and thanks everyone for joining in. And we'll end the session here. And this will be available in recordings when they're published, so you can follow up if you don't have Rich's information yet. You can get it from the recording. So, thanks.
Thanks, everybody, and looking forward to catching up with you. And you can always check us out at bestiebot.com. You can find me on the Lancaster Tech Slack channel. I am on there constantly. Make sure if you're not a part of that, join the Lancaster Slack channel. And, of course, you can reach me at rich@bestiebot.com. So thanks a lot, and enjoy the rest of the conference.